Good evening. This is the third part to a call to arms. So the question is, well, it's not really a question, it's more of a command, and you need to summarize the results of the early battles in the colonists' fight for independence. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just go through and read and highlight some information that I can learn, because it looks like here we're going to have to figure out what is the main idea and three details. And so as I had talked about in class, we're going to write a main idea sentence. And the main idea sentence is, these battles were, or actually, since the question is what were the results of the early battles, the results of the early battles were. So we didn't really have to do this passage is mostly about, you just really had to turn the question around or restate the question in a different way. So we're going to go up to when they start talking about the militias. So it says colonial militias, and remember the militias were just regular people who had guns and they got together and they fought other people. Excuse me. Remember the first time we heard about the militia forming was during Shays' Rebellion. Well, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't Shays' Rebellion, it was Bacon's Rebellion. When Nathaniel Bacon got his friends together and went out into the woods and started fighting the Native Americans. So the colonial militias were a tradition in American colonies. That means that they happened quite often. They had been formed in most colonies to protect and serve the people who lived in the colonies. So they were their own little military, and they were there to protect the people who lived in the colonies. Militias members used their own weapons, and they trained with other citizen soldiers. As tensions with the British grew, more people joined militias, and they began gathering and storing military supplies. So some militias were known as Minutemen because they claimed that they could be ready to fight in a minute's notice. Many colonists believed that if fighting were to break out, it would happen in New England. New England were, remember the colonies, the different of the 13 colonies, and you had the New England colonies, so that's where fighting would break out. Following the Continental Congress's call to arms, the Massachusetts militia began training and stockpiling weapons. So Great Britain sent its own troops. So the British were also preparing for a fight. By April 1775, thousands of British soldiers camped in and around Boston. King George III ordered British General Thomas Gage to seize or to take the Massachusetts militia's weapons and arrest its leaders. So apparently it was illegal for the American colonists to form militias. Massachusetts militia's weapons and arrest leaders. Gage heard that the militia stored its weapons at Concord, a town near Boston. On April 18, 1775, he sent 700 troops to destroy the weapons. All right, so that should have made, how do you think that the colonists felt to have the British destroy their weapons. Colonists in Boston saw the troops march out of town. Paul Revere and William Dawes, members of the Sons of Liberty, rode to Lexington, which is a town near Concord, which is all in Boston. They warned the colonists that the British were coming. About 70 Minutemen were waiting for the British when they reached Lexington. So we got 700 versus 70. British, when they reached Lexington, someone fired a shot, causing both sides to begin shooting, and then 8 Minutemen were killed. The British then moved on to Concord. So that was the fight at Lexington. So you can say that they lost the fight at Lexington. So I'm going to say the colonists lost the fight, the battle at Lexington when someone fired a shot and both sides started shooting. So we're going to say 8 Minutemen were killed. And so we're going to just keep going. They destroyed the few weapons that were left and then met a group of Minutemen waiting for them. In a short battle, the British took heavy losses, and they began to make their way back to Boston. As word spread about the British movement, colonists hid along the road from Concord to Boston. So they went over to Concord. The British then went to Concord, and it says they destroyed the few weapons that were left there, and then met a group of Minutemen waiting for them. In a short battle, the British took heavy losses. So let's see. Let's go down a little bit more just to make sure that we're right here. They began to make their way back to Boston, and word spread out, and the colonists hid along the road from Concord to Boston. And as the British troops passed, they fired on them. By the time the British reached Boston, 73 of their soldiers had been killed and wounded. All right, so and we could just say, and the British then went to Concord, and many of them were killed when some of the colonists, colonists hid and ambushed them. So that is Lexington and Concord. All right, so it says more military action. The battle for independence had begun. After Lexington and Concord, many of the colonists were ready to join militias. Benedict Arnold of the Connecticut militia enlisted 400 men. He set out to capture Fort Ticonderoga on Lake Champlain in New York, and he joined with Ethan Allen and the Vermont militia known as the Green Mountain Boys. Together, they caught the British by surprise. Fort Ticonderoga surrendered on May 10th, and later Arnold became a traitor. So the next battle was at Fort Ticonderoga. So we're going to say after Lexington and Concord, many colonists were ready to join the militia. So that's going to be the first thing we're going to say. Many colonists joined the militia after the battle at Lexington and Concord. Basically, they went to Fort Ticonderoga, where, what happened at Fort Ticonderoga? Let's see. British took heavy losses. Let's go down. Benedict Arnold of the Connecticut militia enlisted 400 men. Ticonderoga on Lake Champlain in New York. He joined with Ethan Allen and the Vermont militia known as the Green Mountain Boys, and together they caught the British by surprise. So who caught the British by surprise? It was Ethan Allen and the Vermont militia, or the Green Mountain Boys. So Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys caught the militia by surprise and beat the British there, and the British surrendered. So Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys caught the British by surprise at Fort Ticonderoga, and the British had to surrender. All right, so I'm going to stop right there, and then I'll be back with the third detail, and then I'm going to give a concluding sentence.